Everything starts from awareness.
Good leadership is simply catalyst.
Focus on the reason and you'll find inspiration in anything.
This impact continues to grow.
Conversation about intentionality.
If you change nothing, nothing will change.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Project Spiral. I'm Abigail.
And I'm Tim. And this week you have, drumroll please, the two of us. Just the two of us. We'd make it if we're the two of us. I don't know the rest of the lyrics other than the two of us.
Tim, I wanted to start this week off with an apology.
Well, first of all, it's not the beginning of the week, but I'll still take your apology, your Tuesday apology.
Did I say start this week off?
I said I wanted to start this week off with an apology.
I meant episode off.
Great.
Oh, well.
This Tuesday episode off with an apology. I'm all
I'd like
ears.
to start this Tuesday episode off with an apology to you and to our listeners.
We're listening.
Okay, so last episode you were talking about our brother who is stuck in the void.
Pieter, yes.
And I said that when it's spelled P-Y-T-R, whatever, that it's just pronounced Peter.
Mm-hmm.
It is sometimes not pronounced Peter. However, okay, wait, let me actually rephrase. One, I will apologize for saying that that name is always pronounced Peter because it is not. However, it is not pronounced Pieter. Sometimes it's like Piotr.
Like pewter, but Piotr? Like
yeah, Piotr.
But there's not an E there.
I know, but it's different. Pieter.
Piotr.
It's still like really close to Peter, but there's kind of like an extra like little dip.
Piotr.
But not
Piotr.
Pieter. So I just, it's I guess it's a half apology because I'm mostly defending myself.
No, but you recognized humility, which is the sign of a good academic. You see, good academics recognize their findings as scientific, saying they're equally invested in proving and disproving what they believe to be true or not true. So you kind of proved one of your null hypotheses, but then disproved the other null hypothesis that I don't even know what I'm saying at this point. Well done, you're half right.
Thanks.
No, I do know what I'm saying. I'm going to double down on this. One of the null hypotheses was that it wasn't that Peter that it's pronounced that Pieter is not pronounced just Peter. So we're correct on there. The other null hypothesis is that what's the opposite of that it was called that his name was Pieter, and you successfully disproved that null hypothesis. Therefore, your hypothesis is true with a degree of certainty.
Okay.
This was really fun. Thank you, everyone.
Anyway, if your name is Pieter, or you have an opinion about this, please let us know.
We'll feature you. We should oh my gosh, it would be so cool if we had an episode filled with different Peters from different countries. So we'll have a Peter. What's Peter in Spanish?
Pedro?
Pedro. Yeah, so we'll have a Pedro, we'll have a Pieter, we'll have a Greek Peter, whatever their name is, and we'll have a conference of the Peters.
Okay.
And everybody, and the whole episode is just gonna be, how do you pronounce your name?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I'm trying not to shoot down ideas, so that's a really good idea.
Thank you. Speaking of not shooting down ideas, we have a fun episode lined up today, and basically we want it to be about hope in the face of the naysayers. So it's something both of us have been thinking about as we've been reaching out to podcast guests. That's been something that has come up a lot in our theme this year of how to find hope in a future that may not exist. And we've also been experiencing a lot of this. So, Abby, I didn't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about how you've been thinking about this topic or approaching it.
Yeah. Well, I think we've talked about it already on the show a little bit, but just kind of like how unfortunately deeply uncool it is to talk about hope because we live in this world where everyone is deeply pessimistic, and if you're aware of the horrors that are going on right now, you tend to view people who are like, no, everything will work out, there can be change, as being kind of ignorant, maybe, or uneducated, or just trying very hard to ignore what's happening, because the feeling is like, well, if you knew what was happening, if you understood, there's no room for hope at all. So I feel like whenever I try out my baby hope skills, I frequently feel like I'm being like looked down upon, or I get responses that are just like, well, you're just not old enough, or you'll see soon enough that this cannot be changed. So I find that really frustrating, and it instantly makes me question everything. And I get so mad because I feel like that's exactly the reason why more people aren't being hopeful, is because they feel stupid for doing so. I don't know. Have you experienced that at all?
Yes. It reminds me of a story I shared in an episode a few episodes back, where I remember I was taking a job teaching overseas in Morocco, and I was 22, and I remember specifically talking to a woman who was 27, and I just graduated college, and I was saying, oh, I'm so excited, I'm going to use theater for social change, I'm going to do all these cool things around the world, I'm so excited, I was into grad school at that point, and this woman was just saying, just you wait, like, you're going to see, your hope will crumble, and just wait till you're 27, then you'll see. And I remember when I turned 27, and her words haunted me, of just saying, like, wow, this is the most idealistic I'll ever get. And how stupid it was. It just changed. Like, and I think, sure, with age, you kind of become a little more realistic about your goals. There's a wider context and a wider degree of what works in the world and not. But no, I think that people who say that, I think that's honestly a fear response, or an unwillingness on their part to imagine a possibility. And there might be very good reasons for that. Maybe it's more safe to imagine as how things are. If there is a possibility for a better future, that might mean that they have to do something for that better future. So I think there's a lot to unpack there, but it's hard sometimes when people say things. We usually take what they say for granted at first. And yeah, when have you found that specifically, Abby? Like, Brenda, how has that come up for you?
I'm trying to think of a specific example. I mean, I can think of
just a vibe.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely think of specific people who I have this sort of same conversation with quite frequently. People who were older than I am, people who came from different backgrounds than I have come from, who, when I try to express hope, or I'm like, oh, I'm doing this thing, I'm working on this project, we're trying to spread hope, it's sort of like, okay, well, that's cute. That's really cute.
Specifically with that word cute?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, oh, she still thinks there can be change. That's cute. People
for all listeners that are listening to us right now saying, you're cute, you're right. We are indeed cute.
We are. You're right.
We are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because I think it comes down again to this thing we've talked about so much, which is the difference between hope and optimism, where optimism is often blind, but hope is intentional. And I think there's like this idea of like, okay, if you've been through enough shit, you know how the world works, and you're going to not expect anything good to happen, which is often the case. But I think if you've been through a lot of shit, and you're still choosing to believe that things can be different and you want to work towards that, I think that's very brave. And I don't think that's stupid. I think it's necessary. And I don't know, I've just been feeling this like big pushback against that. And also just feeling like, I mean, I understand where it comes from, but like, oh my God, being pessimistic is so lazy. Like, that's the easiest thing in the world, is to just succumb to the hopelessness. It's pushing at you from all sides. Like, that's easy. It's feeling hope that takes effort. We shouldn't make fun of people for feeling that. We should commend them.
Well, I agree and disagree. That I think, and in that definition that you shared about the difference between hope versus optimism, hope is still getting out of bed in the morning. I don't think I would agree with the statement that pessimism is laziness. I think pessimism is a way of dealing with the future, dealing with the unknown, as is optimism. And yeah, like I wouldn't even call myself pessimistic with some things. Like I was having a conversation with my mom, heads up. Hello, Debbie Steckler.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom. And we were like something I was
Hi,
mentioning.
Dad. Don't feel left
Hi,
out.
Dad. Hi, Dad. We were talking about just worries
Hi,
about.
dogs. Hi, puppies.
My parents have two
Hi,
puppies.
guys.
Their names are Percy and Kaylee.
Hi, Percy. Hi,
And
Kaylee.
and we'll insert a picture here of them, and they are adorable, as you can see. But they're listening. They're highly intelligent.
Sorry for interrupting you.
It's okay. I was talking to my mom about just like worries about like how much further authoritarian Trump will go, and will he try to run for a third term? And I remember telling her that I was like, I don't think the question anymore is how far will he go. I think the question is, I think it's very certain he will try to become a dictator. The question is, can people stop him? And I don't think, is that pessimism for me to think that like he will try to do the worst possible
No,
action?
I don't think that is pessimism. I think that's realism. I mean, to me, how I'm defining it, I don't know, I'm trying to think. I read this quote recently that, I mean, this is using the word optimism instead of hope, but it was this whole idea of you should have pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the spirit, which I thought was really interesting. I can look up who said that. But it's sort of like understanding that things are bad and sort of seeing a trajectory of them getting worse. I don't really see that as pessimism. I see that as like a prediction that's negative, but it's not saying like things just will get worse. It's like this person is going to make things go worse. But what the whole pessimism of the spirit in the sense would being like, and there's nothing we can do about it. But to me, it's realistic and maybe in a pessimistic way to be like, things are getting really, really bad. But then the hope comes in to be like, but what are we going to do about it?
And with what you were saying about the hope being intentional, is you getting out of bed even with that pessimism of the intellect of saying like, yeah, things are not looking good. And I kind of dread now looking at the news every morning for what bulwarks of democracy Trump's destroyed today. But saying even despite that, you continue and you try to build something. I think something that we've talked about on this podcast and what we're trying to do is saying like, how do we have a sense of hope without being blind to the realities around us? So we've been doing a new kind of marketing campaign, and you might have seen it, that we've been posting examples of good news, and we've been trying to post more about inspiration on different days. And we're really trying to do that and keeping the sense of hope. And I think optimism too. I think it's an optimistic realm of hope, and keeping ourselves realistic of what's going on. I think we're doing a good job. And I think that the people that we've talked to, I think about Anna Zoe, and her real amazing work on hope and climate change, being realistic about saying that we're going to go over the 2-degree threshold, and people who are working to free Mahmoud Khalil. I'm thinking of Connor Thompson and Nada Hamida with her architecture. So how do we get to a place where we have that hope and be realistic, I think is one of their central themes that we're trying to think about for this podcast.
Yeah. And then how do you talk back, or how do you respond to someone who is criticizing you for being hopeful?
I think I would just question why. Like, why? When did they start feeling that way? Beyond when they give advice. That's my instinct of just like, what's going on for you? Because I feel like most people that say that they're not hopeful, either like most of the time they're the ones that are not most effective. I think when you hope when you need to, and that's kind of So that's just a question that comes to mind.
That's true. When it comes to kind of like, I think it's just so interesting because I feel like a lot of people feel like optimism is kind of a privileged position to be in, of like, well, you think the world's amazing, so of course you're going to think it's going to keep being amazing. But I do think I mean, I can't speak to optimism. Maybe that is the case, but I think the idea of hope is more for the people who are in life or death situations, who are like in the throes of real problems and who still believe they can fight for, safety or to get out of whatever situation they're in. And it's like, if you can afford to be pessimistic, like, you're probably in a good spot. Who are fighting for their lives can't really afford to be pessimistic. They have to have hope or else they're not going to make it.
Yeah. Yeah. And saying it's a choice when you're not the one directly affected. Like, I think about immigration. I think about U.S. citizens right now. Well, they're starting to deport U.S. citizens. But for most people are saying, hey, you're going to be all right. I've been in conversations where it's like, everything's going to be fine. We're going to be all right. And it's like, you'll be all right. But maybe not everyone else.
I got really angry because I was actually just watching Love is Blind, cultured reference, but
high culture.
I don't know I'm only on episode 3 or 4 of this most recent season, so who knows what's going to happen. But there was a conversation between this lady and this guy, and she was asking him his opinions on politics. They're both white people. And the guy is like, well, I just like, I don't really think it concerns me, and so I don't really like having an opinion or getting involved. And she's not happy with this answer. She's like pressing him, and he reveals he didn't vote in the last election. And then she's like, well, what about like Black Lives Matter? Surely like that's something you support. And he's like, no, I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. I think, it doesn't really concern me. And I was just like, she got really mad. And because that's exactly the attitude that is problematic. Because if you do have an opportunity to have a voice, if you do have an opportunity to like stand up for something right, even if it doesn't directly affect you, you have to do that. And it is like such a privileged place to just be like, I'm not gonna take a stance on like violence against Black people. It doesn't affect me. Like, oh my God. And like you were just saying with immigration, so many people being like, whatever, I'm just gonna keep living my life. Like, they're not gonna come for me. You don't know that. You don't know that.
And yeah, exactly. And I think one of the lessons from the Holocaust is when they started rounding up certain groups of people. I don't remember the exact order. Other groups just said, at least it's not us. And then they came for them and them. And once you
poem.
Yeah. Oh, it's that. Yes, there is a poem. Yeah, but like how discrimination against one group dehumanizes you too. Like the classic example I think of is how during the Civil War in the South, most of the people who fought and died to preserve the institution of slavery were poor white people, tricked into saying, hey, we need this awful policy of enslavement because like you might be dirt poor, but at least you're not enslaved. But even though that kept them in poverty and kept them working in the same system, and then that they were being harmed by the same system they were trying to protect, they were equally dehumanized. Not equally, but very much dehumanized. What you're saying also reminds me, I was reading a book, the autobiography of Nelson Mandela, The Long Walk to Freedom. And there's some really interesting parts to that. One of the things that he does is shortly before he's arrested, him and the African National Congress come up with this Freedom Charter. And it's all about imagining this totally new South Africa where it would be non-racial, it would be like equal rights. I'm not going to get all the details of it right, but just kind of like a return to like basically just like a place where people can like truly live in harmony, and there'd be reparations, but it would really South Africa for South Africans. And this was all in the middle of apartheid, and when apartheid was getting worse and worse and worse, and they were tightening it. And still in the middle of it, he was like, this is this charter. This is the backbone of what we're doing. And he didn't compromise that position. He never, they kept it forward for years, including through his 30 years of imprisonment. And that dream didn't fully come to fruition, but pretty damn close. And it's just really interesting of like, how do you imagine a different world, like a better world, even in the middle of the shitstorm or when things are continuously getting worse? I think it's still a worthwhile exercise.
It's so funny. I was going to share this quote, and that like directly leads into this. I found it this morning. This is Rebecca Solnit's new book, our favorite.
She has a new one.
She's a new one. It's called No Straight Road Takes You There. And I just started it, so I'm not very far in. But I found this, it's a bit of a long one, so buckle in. But I thought it was really good. She's basically talking about how people talk about things as being inevitable and how she wants to change that rhetoric and have people talk about things more as being evitable rather than inevitable. So here's the quote. Speaking of sorry, let me begin again. Sorry, Rebecca. Speaking of evitability, I've cherished unpredictability as the other face of possibility. If you already know what's going to happen, there's nothing more or nothing else possible, a view that often leads to disengagement and passivity. But mostly we don't know. These proclamations about inevitability are often false prophecies. Hope in this sense is just the recognition that in that uncertainty, there may be the space in which to move toward the best and away from the worst of those possibilities, that the future is not, as it is so often spoke of, a place that already exists toward which we are trudging, but a place that we are creating with what we do and how we do it, or don't, in the present. Or rather, hope is that recognition and a commitment to the pursuit of the better possibilities within the spaciousness of the unknown, the not yet created. As Audre Lorde said, to refuse to participate in the shaping of our future is to give it up. Do not be misled into passivity, either by false security, they don't mean me, or by despair, there's nothing we can do. Each of us must find our work and do it.
Wow.
That was really cool.
I love that emphasis of process in it, where it's about what we're engaged. Yeah, not the end outcome, but the processes we're engaged in today.
I love that idea of hope. What did she say? Hope is the recognition and commitment to the pursuit of the better possibilities within the spaciousness of the unknown.
Wait, so read that again.
Hope is that recognition. So it's basically recognition that we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Hope is that recognition and a commitment to the pursuit of the better possibilities within the spaciousness of the unknown, the not yet created. So the sense that we know what's happening. The only thing we know for sure is what's happening right now, but we don't know what's going to happen next. We can predict what's happening next. And we can predict bad or good things. It doesn't matter what you think is going to happen. It matters that you realize that's not set in stone. I think that's what she's saying. And she also talks about, so far in the book, she talks a lot about how some of the biggest changes, over her lifetime have seemed to happen kind of out of nowhere. Like the fall of the Soviet Union happened immediately, and nobody could have foreseen that happening. Nobody saw it happening, and all of a sudden it was gone. A lot of work went into that. Obviously, there's people that demonstrated and protested and fought for a very long time, but from an outside perspective, it happened really quickly. And so that came from people being able to imagine a future that did not exist. And so she talks a lot about how, we look around the world, we see all these structures that seem so sturdy and these people that seem so powerful, and we're this will be here tomorrow. This will continue. But it's that hope is the ability to be well, what if they don't? What if they can fall? What if we can beat them?
Yeah.
What if we do that? What if we start the work towards that right now because we believe that we can? And I think that's just so important because it's that ability to imagine it better. That's what I'm feeling. It's I'm talking about pessimism and recognizing that things are going bad and getting worse. There's nothing wrong with that. But you also have to be able to imagine a future where things get better.
That's so cool. And yeah, you have to have that future imagination. You have to have that vision, or else what motivation would you have? And if you can't see what the finish line is, or at least an idea or an ideal of what that finish is. And what you're talking about the unexpected fall of the Berlin Wall, or the collapse of the USSR, or of I don't know, the fall of Nazi Germany.
Well, that was more of a war.
Well, that was more of a war.
A little war.
A little war. But still a huge gap for... Okay, we'll stick with the USSR.
Yeah, it's a better example.
Better example. Yes, that moment was huge and no one saw it coming, but it came through lots of little movements and changes that people did. Movements that on the surface, they didn't matter. And I've been recently reading the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. He described it. Basically, it's a book about how do you create easy little habits to start changing your life to a degree, and then that builds up over time. Where he talks about an ice cube and saying if you look at an ice cube, it's 27 degrees Fahrenheit. It's the same. It's just frozen. 28 degrees, 29 degrees, 30, 31. It's still the same ice. And you're like, it's not working. It's not heating up. And then the moment it hits 32, then it starts melting. And then 33, 35. But you don't see that work. Each of those degrees mattered, but you didn't see that work until right as it hit 32 degrees or Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. And yeah, I just think about that with like social movements and other aspects where sometimes you don't see the apparent work today, but that reimagination, those little things still matter. And one thing I'm curious, Abbie, because something that I respect about you is that like you will get up and do the work even through uncertainty. Something that I struggle with too is like sometimes we're talking about naysayers from the outside. One of the biggest naysayers for me is just inside of saying, what's the point? So I'm just like, I'm wondering what, like, when you feel that uncertainty that we're talking about, that sometimes others reflect on to you or me, how do you keep going? How do you do that for you?
Well, it's a good question because I'm definitely struggling with that right now. But I think like, I don't know, it's this knowledge that an understanding that I feel like I'm really beginning to grasp so far this year, which is that we don't have a choice. Like, we really don't have a choice if we want change. Like, nothing is going to happen unless we believe it can and we work towards that. So, like, what I mean, I have not vocally said this to any naysayers, but I have been saying it to myself, which is like, okay, like, so like what? You're just gonna give up? You're just gonna do nothing? That's the alternative here, is you do nothing. And then things definitely aren't gonna get better. But if you do something, there's a tiny chance they might get better. And that seems like a better use of time. Like, if we're not gonna try, what are we doing? What are we doing? Like, we're just that, like, this stupid, the dog in the burning house being like, this is fine. It's fine. We're gonna be burned to a crisp.
Or Elmo.
Elmo.
Yeah. You know that there's Elmo and like the Hellfire.
No, I don't think I know that means.
Where he's just like, just Elmo
Maybe.
burning.
I'll
Or no,
have
he's
to
not
look it up.
burning. He's just in hell or surrounded by flames.
That's so sad.
Yeah.
I was wondering, can we just like run a scene real fast to practice?
Of what? The dog?
No, not the dog. Saying no to a naysayer.
Oh, I was like, why are we doing that? That's so sad.
Okay.
Also, what would the characters be? It would be the flames and I would be the dog?
Like, I'm Elmo and you're the dog and the house is on fire.
Fire, yeah. Am I the naysayer?
Yeah, you can be the naysayer.
Okay. What's a social topic we should...
The environment.
The environment. Okay. Hey, Abbie. So, still working on addressing environmental issues? You care about global warming? Huh?
Okay, let's
You
restart.
fool!
Let's restart. Okay, that was great. I felt very attacked. Okay, let's like set.
Naysayer wins.
Okay, so in this scene, you're my neighbor, okay, and I'm gonna be outside, like putting compost into my compost bin. Okay.
Got it. Okay.
Let's try this. Okay. So,
okay, got it. Okay, I'm sweeping.
So I'm shoveling compost into the compost bin.
And I'm sweeping the porch. Hey, smells bad over there.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. It's just the compost. But as soon as I put it in the bin, you won't smell it anymore.
Oh, you're doing that.
Yeah. You actually have a bin too. Everyone can compost the city.
Yeah. It's just, I do know it, and good for you for doing that. I don't know if it works, but
well,
good
I
for
mean,
you.
I think like every bit makes a difference, and I think that it does reduce waste and reduces what goes into landfill, and the stuff in compost can actually be repurposed for fertilizer, and it's like it actually makes a really big difference. So I think it's definitely worth doing. If you already have the trash, so you might as well separate it out. It doesn't take that much extra work.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just kind of a hassle, and I heard that even like recycling doesn't even work that well, and so it's just like, why? Like, I just like why. It just seems like a lot of work, and what's one person going to do? So I think I'm just gonna continue throwing out my trash. But
I mean, the whole thing is like, if it's about the collective, right? So if a lot of people do it, that's going to make a difference. And if everyone is like, well, what's one person going to do? They don't do anything, the difference won't, like the change won't happen. But I do think every little person doing something small does actually make a big impact.
oh,
And what's the alternative?
Like
Neighbor?
I love how young you are, and how and how you like. I love that there's people like you trying out there. I think us boomers, we know a thing or two about the way the world works.
First of all,
Whoa!
screwed us over. We wouldn't be in this situation if it weren't for your gas guzzling cars and your disregard for the environment. So we're out here cleaning up your mess. So shut up and get back inside your house.
Okay, well, no more Sunday potlucks for you, neighbor. Ah! I had a feeling when you came in here with your Gen Z attitude that you suck.
Oh, we threw the broom at me. Ow.
And I take your compost bin and dump it on you.
Oh, it's so gross. Yuck.
Take that.
God, no.
Well, I think the Naysayer won.
Yeah, that was, oh God. Yeah. It ended very violently.
So it'll probably get your... How about that for reimagining a world?
About that for reimagining a world. Take that.
Take that. Take that.
I mean, they definitely say everything that you said I've heard before. So I think that.
Yeah. But like in all seriousness, like with the reimagining side, like that a lot of like abolitionists, people that are trying to get rid of the modern idea of a police force in the United States, they talk a lot about how, yeah, just like part of what the work needs to be done is not just tearing down old systems, but what can a community-based policing look like? How can justice be redefined? How can enforcement be redefined with especially communities with high affected crime, mostly communities of color? How can they kind of lead the charge with what justice looks like for them and for wider communities? And how can we get to a bigger place? And does that look likely right now? Of course, that seems far away off, but you have to start that imagination process of what kind of world with better composting be, with a world with nonviolent police. And once you start thinking of that, then you can outthink the current systems.
No, I totally agree. And I also think that it's funny, just like your response as that boomer just got me thinking about like picking your battles, right? And like, are you going to convince your boomer neighbor to start composting? Maybe, probably not. You know, maybe it's better to focus your energy on people who are more receptive, where there actually can be more change, and save your energy, you know, to get into circuitous arguments probably isn't the best use of time. And so if it's like the question of that, like, what do you say to a naysayer? Maybe it's nothing at all. Maybe you're just like, okay, I'm sorry you feel that way. This is how I feel. Like, you don't necessarily have to convince someone to share your imagined view of the future, because they're not going to be the ones on your team anyway. I think if you can find a collective who can agree on an imagined future and then you all work towards it, I think that's where like really like change can happen, is like that shared imagination. And those who don't care to share it don't have to.
No, they don't. I'm really curious. So like thinking about Trump's America, we're seeing all these declines. If you could, like, what would be 3 aspects of government you'd want to see and what they're doing, or 3 policies? A perfect world.
Wow. Free healthcare, free good healthcare, accessible healthcare, free good education, a real commitment to climate act, or climate, like, you know, what's the word? Sustainability, a real commitment to sustainability, because otherwise everything else won't matter.
Yeah, there won't be a world.
What about you?
Disbanding all militaries. I agree with the ones you said, but in addition, I wouldn't mind either completely open borders or like so much laxer immigration, counter movements of ideas and people. And I want the Security Council to disappear from the UN. I want the UN to still exist, but the Security Council should bid it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just funny. Because these 6 things we've just said seem quite difficult to achieve. But I also feel like there have been other really big changes through government, even just in the US, that might have felt impossible several generations before. It's the abolition of slavery might have felt impossible. Votes for women might have felt impossible. All these things that were unthinkable and felt like these like big systems that were impossible to change. They changed. That's because people fought for them. And so I think any of these things could actually happen.
I agree. They are feasible.
Wow, the police are coming for you.
They're like, we heard you were reimagining us. Well, before we get arrested, thank you for a wonderful conversation.
This was fantastic, fun little duo episode. Just some reminders, favorite listeners or viewers, be sure to follow along with us on social media. We're projectspiral.nyc. Feel free to follow along, watch, listen, subscribe, and most importantly, leave a review because we really need reviews.
Please.
Or actually, probably even more. Sorry, I said that was the most important. That is very important. But what's probably even more important is we'd love to hear from you. So if you have any responses, any questions, if you have anyone you want to recommend to be on the show, let us know.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you back here soon.
Thank you for watching and listening. Bye.
Bye.
This has been a production of Little Scorpion Studios.
Wait, I have to put on a cool jacket. Cool jacket, cool jacket. Cool jacket time. Cool jacket. You see? It's cool.
It's very cool.
It's a cool jacket. I was wearing a jeans jacket and I felt like I was in the 90s all over again. Because I was wearing a jacket up until through age 3. Through most of age 3. Anyways.
You speak a little bit quieter.
I will speak quietly. Innocuously. Like dusk before dawn.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you.